Hey guys, and welcome to Worlds Together. We are going to be talking tonight about... Boy, I forgot to title my stuff. Hold on. We are going to be talking about religions and gods in your RPG campaign. So, we're going to talk about quite a few things there, but I want to get my presentation titled right. And they'll switch over to that. Good, here we go. So gods and religions. We're going to talk about a few things. One, we're going to do a real world overview of religions in the real world and what they act like as elements of growth and what kind of effects they have on the world. Then we're going to look at some sources of inspiration, some places you can go to get ideas about if you're world building and how to put gods and religions together and things. We're going to talk about what kind of things you might want to think about for rules for your religions and your the way that you build them and what things you think about for them. And then we're going to have some practice and go build a religion or two in our fantasy world that we're kind of building together as we go all along. Here we go. So, a couple things before we get started. One, I declare Wednesday nights as Beer Wednesday because I have some. So, I've got a couple of Kona IPAs here that I'm going to try. I haven't tried IPAs. I'm more of a dark beer person. I like dark beers and lagers. But, give these a shot. I'm okay with light beers. But, I mean, not like light colored, not like Bud Light. Ugh. But anyway, it's a Beer Wednesday. Cheers. Secondly, we are going to be talking about religion, which can be dangerous if you're not careful with it. So, we are not going to be talking about religious beliefs. We're not going to be talking about any judgments of any religions. When I talk about real world religions, I'm going to try to stick to just facts, demographics, how they spread, what kind of impacts they have on culture and society, but not judgments about religions. Just so you know, I am Christian. I'm a practicing Christian. I have a very, very good friend who's an atheist. It's fine, chat. You don't have to be Christian to take part in this. You don't have to be Christian to be my friend. That's not a thing with me. So, just so you know, I am. You don't have to be. It's all cool. So, let's get started with some fun things about what happens in the real world with religions. I think it's instructive to take a look at this stuff, and we're not going to go in depth. I mean, years can be spent studying this stuff and the impacts it has and the different things that it does. But there are some kind of high level things that help you kind of frame your own religions and pantheons and gods when you're doing it in your campaign. So, the first thing we're going to take a look at is some demographics of real-world religions and how they have changed historically, because that'll kind of give us an idea of the difference between young religions and older established religions and how religious thought migrates as time passes. So there's two major types of religions that you'll be dealing with, monotheistic or polytheistic. I mean, there really isn't any other thing. Either you believe if you're religious, it's one god or many gods. I don't think there's any other choices. Today-ish, and these are rounded figures, not exact figures, but close enough to give us an idea, there are essentially two main religions in the world, Christianity and Islam. So that makes up the majority of people in the world are one of those two religions or profess to be one of those two religions. As opposed to 2.5% of the world population, roughly, is atheist. And about 12% overall is non-religious. They don't affiliate with a religion. That includes atheists. So you can see that the non-religious people are almost as big a group as the third biggest religion in the world population, which is Hinduism. So what happens over long periods of time is that religions tend to consolidate. So if you were to look at 2,000 years ago, there are many smaller religions, and more of the religions are polytheistic. If you look at today's religions, there are fewer and larger religions, and they're more monotheistic. So in the real world, that's been the tendency of how religions grow and move. They go from many smaller polytheistic religions to fewer, larger, primarily monotheistic religions. I'm not making any judgments about that. I'm just saying them's the facts. Overall, if you look at how religion has spread throughout the world, in the grand scheme of things, in the time of human existence, religious conversion and expansion is relatively slow. There can be little explosions, but for the most part, it's a fairly slow, steady kind of conversion and expansion. So we'll talk too about some of the societal impacts that religion has when it grows and expands, and what things to think about in your world when you're putting religion in it, or when religion becomes a significant part of your world. And when you're thinking about these things, what kind of effects would it have on your populations? Now, again, this is years of stuff that can be studied, so we're not going to go into great detail with this. I just want to hit some high points so we have stuff to think about when we're doing that. So one thing is, and this is just the facts, religion is responsible for a large percentage of wars that have ever been fought, because if you're fighting wars, you're either fighting them for religion or you're fighting them for resources. And yes, power, but power, you're fighting wars to get resources to make you more powerful. So, wars are a huge societal impact that religion has, especially as it grows and spreads. Now, I'm not saying religion is bad or the cause of wars. I'm saying historically, a lot of wars have been fought over religion. It also, a lot of systems of laws and moral codes are developed from religious beliefs. So in a lot of societies, what happens first is the religion forms, and then the laws and moral codes are written down based on the religious values of that society. Not always, but a lot of times. Religion is also responsible for a whole lot of spread of science and technology. So if you're thinking about this in your fantasy campaign, right, it's going to be depending on how old your religions are, you're going to have a lot of science and technology being transferred from place to place because of the way religion generally tends to work, which is religious people tend to go out and mission to other areas of the world. And when you do that, it takes your science and technology with you. Same can be said for cultural spread. The missioning and the conversion as the religion converts out, it spreads culture, and you start assimilating other cultures and beliefs, and things just start to homogenize a bit. So you've got not only migration and relocation of religious groups, but also, religious people going on missions, going out to do their proselytizing, and that spreads culture and science and technology. It also, religion historically has been the basis of a lot of national common identities. And a lot of it has to do with how people look at understanding the world around them and the things that they use to explain those. So you've got like creation stories and hero stories. Almost every religion, well, every one that I've ever come across or have looked at has a creation story. And that says a lot about the society that has developed that creation story. And of course, language. Language is spread a lot by religion. Latin was essentially a dead language except for Catholics. In the Middle Ages, in the late Middle Ages, the only people who really could read or write Latin anymore were, by and large, Catholic priests and monks. So, language situations and language spread is heavily influenced by religion. All right, so that's enough of the real world stuff. Again, that's, you could spend years studying all that and analyzing it. It's incredibly complex, and religion has a huge effect on real world cultures, politics, geopolitical interactions, interpersonal relations. It's just massively complex in society. But that should give us at least some things to think about when we're trying to put religion and gods and things like that into a world that we're building. So next I want to talk a little bit about some sources of inspiration, places you can go and look at things and see, well, how has this been done? What kind of ideas can I get from it? What kinds of things do I look at? And so one of the, come on, machine. There we go. One place you can go and look is real world religious texts. And I don't just mean the Bible. It's good. If you've ever read through the Bible, it's got a lot of neat stories and heroes and wars and how people think about things and how the Jews and the Gentiles thought about things differently in the world. But all the religious texts have some type of thing like that. The Quran, the Hindu religious texts. And I'm not saying I'm a scholar of these things. I'm just saying I have looked into this enough to know that that's a good place to look to see, well, how does this stuff affect the world? There's an AD&D book that it's fairly old called Deities and Demigods. I loved that book. It was fantastic for taking a look at and explaining the different pantheons. I used to spend hours and hours going through that book in my room and just looking at the different pantheons, and it would have the heroes and all the gods and, all that stuff. There's another lesser known book that was really good as well. Now, I've long since lost my Deities and Demigods. I have no idea where it is, but Legends and Lore was also a second edition book. And it is more of a look at real world historical religious beliefs, like the Egyptians and the Chinese, the Greek mythology, and it kind of goes through all that stuff. So it's almost a history book. It also looks at a few fantasy type settings and how religion was integrated into those. So that's also a really good source for taking a look at it. And it's specifically written for putting things into a fantasy D&D setting. The Silmarillion is fantastic for taking a look at kind of a different creation story and how that fit into a fantasy world. So if you get a chance, not the whole Silmarillion, but the first part that talks about the creation, world creation, it kind of gives you a sense of what the different races thought about how their world was created and where they were coming from. So that's a fantastic look at this stuff in a high fantasy setting. And of course, the classic mythologies, the Greek, Roman, Norse, Egyptian, etc. mythology, those are of course, the big ones, but there's tons of them out there. So finding those and getting hold of those is a good way to look at how did these different people think about their creation stories and their gods, and how did that reflect their society, and how did society change because of these religious beliefs. Fairy tales, believe it or not, like Grimm's fairy tales, Hans Christian Andersen, those are really good inspiration for these types of things. And I'm not saying religion is a fairy tale. What I'm saying is there are a lot of aspects of story writing and superhuman type elements to that are demonstrated really well in those fairy tale settings. All right, so if we were to go and take a look at putting religion into our world that we're building for our fantasy setting, what are the rules going to be? Here are some of the questions that you should ask. You don't have to ask all of them. You don't have to answer all of them. It can get really complicated. It depends on how involved you want your religion to be in your setting. But here are some things to think about. 1, what are the interpersonal relationship standards that are dictated in that religion? For instance, is it okay to have many wives? Is it okay to have is murder ever justified? Is theft ever justified? What are their attitudes towards the foundations of interpersonal relationships? And I'm not just talking about, and honestly, I would stay away from trying to broach this topic, the LGBTQA stuff. That's not, I mean, that's included in that, but that's not all I'm talking about. I'm talking about just any kind of interpersonal relationships with people, especially what happens with people of other religions. That's a big deal, and a lot of religions have rules about how you interact with people of other religions. Yes. What is the religion's views on money and wealth? Do they expect their priests to live without money? Do their priests, are they usually well paid and high status? Do they expect you to tithe? Do they expect that you give 50% of what you have to the church? What kind of views do they have on money and wealth? Is it okay to be a rich person? Whatever that means. What's the clergy structure? Is there a hierarchical clergy structure? For instance, the Catholic Church has a very set structure, hierarchical structure that's fairly deep, and is very well established. Now, that's because the Catholic Church has been around for millennia. By way of comparison, a lot of the Protestant religions, especially things like Presbyterianism and Methodism and Baptists, have a more rural pastor or traveling pastor type setup, where the pastor may come for a couple years and then they move on to another church and they rotate through, and there's not a whole lot of hierarchy. In the Methodist church, there's the pastor and the bishop, and that's it. I mean, there's no pope, there's no archbishop, there's none of that. And there's many different types of structures, but if you're going to build a religion from scratch, a clergy structure is very important, because is there one person in the world like the Pope that everybody eventually funnels to? Or is it a more distributed system for the clergy? What kind of holidays, observances, and rituals does your religion have? In the geopolitical place where this religion is predominant, does that dictate the country holidays, or are those holidays only observed by people, practitioners of that religion? How does that work in your religion? What kind of rituals do they have? You can have a lot of interesting things go on with rituals, especially if you're playing like a hey, gentlemen, thoughts? How are you? Especially if you're playing like a priest character or something, having a ritual that you have to go through, like once a week you have to do this thing to please your god, or your god gets unhappy with you and starts taking your powers away. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do with rituals and stuff to have some fun with that. But these are all kinds of things that you should think about for your religions. And you guys let me know if the background music gets too loud. I tried to keep it pretty low, but so are there religious laws versus guidelines? In a lot of real world religions, there's a big difference between hey, thanks, gentlemen's thoughts. I'm doing fantastic. We're just having fun here. I'm glad you think it's interesting. We just cover all kinds of different topics for RPGs tonight. I thought we would, talk about putting religion into RPGs and see what kind of fun that could get us into. So, when you're putting religions in, think about laws versus guidelines. So, for instance, those people over there that aren't of the same religion, is it a law that you can't marry them? Is it frowned upon if you do, but it's not really a law? Or is it perhaps we don't care, marry who you want, whether you're a religion or not? I mean, those are all things that happen in the real world, and not just marriage, but there's a whole lot of difference between here's the way we think you should act, here's how we really strongly recommend you act, and here are laws that'll get you kicked out of the religion if you violate them. That there's a big difference between those. And another big thing to think about is, what is their attitude and acceptance of outsiders, people outside of the established religion? Is your priest going to feel it necessary to convert everybody in the party to their religion because that's their job? Is it that the priest is, they believe that it's a personal relationship with the god, and that that they just need to go out and help people as part of their religion, but proselytizing is not really part of the thing? How does that work? What are the attitudes towards other religions and people outside? What do you do with them? How do you deal with them? So those are some things to think about when you're trying to put religion into your RPG. So I thought it might be a fun exercise to create a religion. Let's go over to the World Anvil for our little world that we've been building. Come on, machine. There you go. Good boy. All right. Here we go. So World Anvil. And we'll create a religion. And we'll kind of go through a little exercise of doing the things that we talked about, thinking about, and seeing what kind of religions we can put into our fantasy world here. So I thought it would be kind of fun to actually try to do two religions. One that's a brand new religion that's just getting started, and one that's a very established religion, so that we can kind of compare and contrast what kind of things do you want to happen when you're dealing with these two different religions. And chat, feel free to speak up with ideas if you have them. Now, the first one that I want to try to tackle is we had this concept in the world where there was a world-changing event. A power-hungry necromancer tried to create a ritual that would raise all the dead in the world at once. And instead of doing that, it exploded. It ripped apart the fabric of magic in this area, and that's slowly spreading out. And rather than bringing the dead back to life, it animated inanimate objects. So we've got this kind of concept of now we've got this new race of beings, these inanimate objects, that don't understand the world, that don't understand where they are, that don't understand what's going on, and they're going to have some way to explain all this stuff to themselves. So they don't know how they got here, and they're trying to develop a creation story and get a sense of where they came from, right? So this would be a very new, very young religion, and it's going to not have a lot of structure, and it's going to just have kind of the beginnings of the creation story because they're still trying to figure all this out, right? So we can call this religion how about the Awakening? No, that was a bad movie. Awakeism. There we go. What's that? I don't know. I mean, just make this stuff up, right? We're just having fun. So, we're going to talk about a couple of things in this religion. This is a religion that is being created by the animated objects that were the result of Tranit's the name of the power-hungry necromancer there. They were the result of Tranit's failed ritual. All right. So, these new creatures do not yet understand the world they live in, nor do they have a concept of where they came from. Now, with religions, typically the first thing that happens is people start looking around and saying, where did we come from? And a creation story develops. So, my thoughts are that these creatures, as they awoke, they would have awoken first at kind of ground zero. And so the things closest to Tranit when he bollocks this up would have awoken first. Since it was a grand explosion, it actually killed him, but there his body lies when these things start waking up. So what we've got is this scene of a bunch of new sentient beings coming to life in front of a body of something they don't really know what it is. So I'm thinking they have to suspect that that's their god, right? So they see Tranit as their god. Then they want to develop a creation story. So, when the world was created, we were asleep and waiting for the awakening. We were created special to be the rejuvenation of, I didn't spell that right, rejuvenation. Rejuvenation. There we go. I still didn't do it right. Rejuvenate. Emoji? No, I don't think so. I don't know. We'll get to it later. Rejuvenation of the old world. Okay, so they see themselves as a rebirthing of the world. Sounds good to me, right? Right, okay. What do you think, chat? Is that good? So their creator sacrificed his life force to awaken us. Yeah, I've kind of changed person here. Okay. Let's say creator is our creator. All right, so this isn't the best wordsmithing here. I'm just trying to do this quickly to get ideas out. All right, so he sacrificed his life force to awaken us. We owe him everything. We are now undertaking a pilgrimage to Tranit's birthplace to better understand. Wait, he wouldn't have a birthplace if he was the creator. Well, where would they be making a pilgrimage to? Because they need to do something to try to understand, right? So they're going to go somewhere where they think they can get some knowledge. They need to find out more about Tranit. They're trying to find the ancient texts. To Tranit's Rest, which is his burial place, because this is a bit in the past. To find the lost, the lost texts of ultimate knowledge. Sure, why not? They're kind of silly little inanimate objects. They don't really understand much, so they think all the ultimate knowledge is in this temple to Tranit. They see it as a temple. They don't understand that he was a mortal that died and he's buried. They think it's just a temple because their creator is immortal, right? All right, so they've created themselves kind of a little a little creation story. They don't have a lot of structure in their religion because they haven't had enough time to create it, and they really are not sure yet what they're trying to, where this is going to go. They're just trying to understand. So they've heard about this place called Tranit's Rest. They saw this creator there, the earthly form of this creator, and so they say, hey, he's not here anymore. We can't ask him what happened. We need to go find the writings that'll tell us what happened. But they haven't worried about, at this point, creating clergy structure or even having clergy. They're just starting to kind of follow this idea that they have a god. So I'm not going to bother with notes for the storytellers. That's kind of what we were doing up here. This will all get kind of wordsmithed later. So what kind of religion is this? Well, where's religion? So I think I would call this, technically it's an organized religion. They have organized, it's just not very organized. So we'll call it an organized religion. All right. Do they have a motto? Probably not yet. Flag crest, we're not going to worry about that. Alternative names. What do we call them? Awakeism. The Waking Few. Sure, why not? The Demonems. What do you call these people? Wakists? It's not. Okay, organization structure. There really isn't any yet. There are some creatures that are starting to emerge as leaders during the pilgrimage. But as yet, there are no rules for organization. Because very young religion. They don't really have a public agenda yet. They're not terribly aware of the public yet. Assets, really none. History, very brief. They have just developed the concept of Tranit being their creator god, and seek more information. More information? No. More knowledge about him. Great. Founding date. Well, I haven't put together dates in this yet, so we'll leave that alone. They haven't disbanded. There's no leader for them. No parent organization. Geographic location. Now, I haven't put the article in here for the blasted lands or whatever we're going to call them, because we haven't decided what to call them yet. And I haven't really put that article in. But that would be their base of operations. And related ethnicities, there aren't really any. So, this is the beginnings of a young religion in our world. This religion really isn't going to be practiced by any of the player characters. However, when these inanimate objects start to interact with the player characters and they start finding out about each other, is it a world I'm creating for a specific RPG? It is. I'm going to actually DM this world for 5e next year. And so I'm kind of going through and working on some things during this show that seem like they fit with the theme. So I am specifically creating it for D&D. However, any kind of fantasy-based world could use it. Oh, well, thanks. Well, I figured it would be fun to share this kind of stuff. I enjoy having conversations about this world building and stuff. I love world building. So I thought it would be fun to, do this. If I'm going to do it anyway, I might as well put a camera on myself and do it, right? Just share it with everybody. Because maybe everybody can learn stuff, and I certainly do every time I get on this, because chat always has great ideas. All right, so there's some little things that'll help me as a DM kind of have a foundation for how these inanimate objects are going to deal with the party when they finally have to interact with them. They're not just going to be weird rage monster creatures. They actually have a background. They're actually on a pilgrimage. They have a reason for coming out in the world, and they're going to have some reactions based on what they think the world is and how it was created. So they're going to start having, this very wondrous reaction to these strange beings that are coming to them that look just like their creator god. And so now we've got the basis for some really cool kind of interactions with the PCs. Hey, Fairy Bard, how are you? Hey, I took your advice. We're talking about religion. We're actually building us some religions. So, yeah. So what we're going to do now, all right, so we've got this basis for a very new religion. Now we're going to kind of contrast this. Let me save this before... I don't want to lose that. All right, so now let's go back to the articles. Nope. Summary. Thanks. I want to contrast that with a very established religion in the world. Right? So, if we're going to have, let's start with our kind of base of operations kingdom and country. So we've got this kingdom of Braneth. Because this is how I like to do things, my vision is kind of the standard D&D 5e medieval European type thing. Oh, no worries. The English was great, man. So if that's a second language, you're doing way better than I'm doing with any of my second languages, which are 0. But yeah, and that's a thing you have to ask. Should your gods be present, or should they be stories and things like that? Should they be kind of hands off? I mean, that's a big distinction. So yeah, but the thing is, if you're going to build an entire world and not just a little region, you may have some religions that are just the story stuff, and some religions in different parts of your world that are the gods are very much involved in that, because maybe different gods, right? If you're talking about polytheistic world. How much of it is true stuff? Right, exactly. So for instance, these little guys that, these little inanimate objects that wake up and see Tranit and say, "This is our creator god." No, he was just a mortal. So is he real? Yes. Is he what they think he is? No. But they had to explain their existence somehow, and that was the way that they figured out to explain it. So, is it true? Maybe. Is it factual? Yeah, but there's a big difference between fact and truth. Especially when you're dealing with religion. So, that's a thing. So, let's say that in the Kingdom of Braneth, the gods are pretty hands-off. They're not actually seen walking around the streets. They're not really seen in physical form. So nobody is really sure if they actually exist or not. Well, I shouldn't say they're not really sure. They haven't seen them. You either are faithful and believe it, or you're not and you don't. That it's just because nobody can prove it, right? Kind of like the religions we have now in the real world. You either believe it or you don't. There is no proof of it. So I think to start with, we start with something that's based in kind of our reality, because it helps to then tweak those things into your own kind of religion. So we should have a name of a religion. I like to start with the name of a religion. You could start with making a god and the actual creation story of your world, and then, following the religions out of that. But I kind of like to do it the other way and start with, hey, what's the name of my religion? So let's say it is, I don't know, chat. What's a good name for a religion in the Kingdom of Braneth? Help me think here, chat. You could do it, chat. Hey, Fairy and Rain, I've officially started Beer Wednesdays. Just so you know. The flying meatball monster. I thought it was spaghetti monster. Oh, but you like your spaghetti with meatballs? No, but one I'm actually going to use in a Beer Wednesdays. Could be. Maybe it's my new religion. Aylesdares. How about that? Children of Dugar. I like that. Do we have a Dugar yet? Is that a known thing, or did you just make that up? Ah, excellent. We'll use that. I'm not opposed to name generators. Yeah, this is an established religion. So what I want to do here is kind of just so we can compare and contrast. We made a brand new religion that's just getting started out. What does a young religion look like? Now I want to do, what does a very old religion look like? One that's been around for thousands of years and has, all the hierarchy of the Catholic Church and all the dogma of the Catholic Church and all that stuff. Not of the Catholic Church, but oh, sorry about that, gentlemen. Thoughts. That's the links are the one thing that I have in my bot. Apologize. I don't let them in here because a lot of kids watch our stream and links have gotten dangerous in the past. So, cool. Wiki DUGAR. Well, let's see what that is. is a Gotra. I don't know what that is. Oh. Okay, so like a clan, a family. Oh. Okay, so it's like a clan, a family name. Huh, interesting. The things you learn. All right. Yeah, that's fine. We'll take the name. Use the name and turn it into something fantasy. Why not? All right. So before we get into the prose form, let's see if we can start with some just some facts about it, because that may make things a little easier. So this is an organized religion, right? Do they have a motto or a slogan? Let's see. So something like, Dugar's peace on you? I mean, right? I'm not gonna worry about a flag right now, because I'm not gonna do graphics at the moment. Alternative names. So, is there something else that they are known as? Oh. How about we combine those? How does that sound? Right? All right, so what else? All right, so for instance, what they're talking about here is things like this. In the early days of Christianity, Christians weren't known as Christians. They were known as followers of the way, right? Jews were called by many names outside of Israel, and I don't mean derogatory names. They were just known as other things. They weren't called Jews in a lot of other places. And that's the same for pretty much any religion or any group of people. You have internal names and you have external names. So, what could they be called? And they may have several alternate names depending on where the names come from. You know, what other parts of the world they come from. Like, yeah, things like that. Path of the Father. Maybe there's a neighboring place that they don't like them, and so they call them Dugar's pests. Path of the Father. Like it. Oh, Lightwearers. Oh, now see, okay. So if we do something like this, so this is why I like to go kind of do the factual stuff. So let's say we say they have a name like Lightwearers, right? That's because they wear special clothing that is enchanted and it illuminates. I mean, why not? Maybe that's a thing that identifies them. And that's something unique to them. Demonems. So what do we call these people? Or, I mean, well, I mean, it really is Children of Dugar, I guess, is the Demonem. Where'd it go? Yeah. Some kind of sun god or light god or... Ooh, even better. How about Light Weavers? They have this ritual where they make special vestments for their priests, and only certain people in this religion are ever taught how to do that. And it's a thing where they weave the cloth in a certain way that makes it illuminate. And it's a highly guarded secret. Ooh, that's kind of cool. All right, so organization structure. All right, so how would this religion be organized? Like, I mean, kind of specifically, its clergy structure and its political structure. So, do we want it to be very highly structured, like the Catholic Church is, that has many layers of clergy, or do we want it to be more shallowly structured, like a lot of Protestant religions are, where they only have, you know, like the priest and bishop, and that's kind of it, and you know, and then there's a global council that meets. More casual structure. Yeah, I kind of like the idea of these people being kind of, you know, if you think about those kind of country circuit pastor type things, you know, the guys that would wear the big wide brim round hats and they would ride from town to town, and you know, I'll be at this church on this Sunday, and next Sunday I'll be at this town, and next Sunday I'll be at this town, and it was kind of this circuit thing, or they may stay for a month or two. I kind of like that, based on just what we're calling them, light weavers, path of the Father. And there's this one uppity place that calls them Dugar's pests, because they're constantly coming through their country. And yes, also that's true. So they may internally have things that are kind of that could kind of resemble guilds in the real world. And they probably would, I mean, they wouldn't call them that, but that kind of structure where, you know, the light weavers guild, as it were, is responsible for making sure that that is guarded and that it is passed on, you know, because if you don't pass it on, you lose it. So, all right, so for the clergy structure, we're going to have something like traveling priests. See, now this would make sense for a PC. Adventuring priests, right? That's just what they do. They travel. Yeah, they could have, you know, servants that do it. All right, so traveling priests, and maybe a high priest per country. I mean, because you got to have somebody that can kind of coordinate things, right? So maybe we do it like that. It's just traveling priests and one high priest per country, or some other geopolitical area, but probably country, right? All right, so the political structure. Right, yeah. So the political structure. So they should have some type of global governing body or council, right? So maybe it's all the high priests get together once a year to make the big decisions of the entire religion, right? And say, here's what you should be doing in your area. So maybe one meeting per year of the high priests. And what would we call that meeting? Maybe we could call it a A priest off. A pelling. I just made that word up. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I heard it somewhere and didn't make it up. I don't know. All right, so internal. So we have guild type organization that handles light weaving. Ooh, we need something that handles travel arrangements. If you've got hundreds of traveling priests, somebody's got to deal with that stuff, right? So that would be multiples of those. And maybe some other stuff that we come up with later, but that's a good start. What's their public agenda? All right, so yeah, hostels or monasteries. I mean, that would make sense. You know, religions typically, in the real world anyway, religions tend to accumulate a lot of power and wealth as a whole in societies. So they would be able to set up places for their priests to stay. I mean, that makes sense, especially if this is a very old and established religion. It's not going to be tiny if it's been around 2,000 years. If it's that small, it doesn't last that long. That's just how religions work. All right, so a public agenda. Now, if we're going to have PCs that play this as priests of this religion, they would have to have a reason to be out there. Now, does this religion proselytize and convert? Is that their main goal? Or is it to go out... yes. Ceremonial accoutrement. I knew I wasn't going to spell that right. There we go. Accoutrements? Really? Is it really spelled like that? Okay. Gentlemen. Very good. Are they good or evil? So, what is their agenda? I would say, I mean, if you're going to have player characters, this is our... this is the predominant religion in our main base of operations city. So, I don't think it's going to be evil. Not this one. We would want to have some evil religions, I think. But this one, I don't think so much. So I'm going to think it's a good religion. So, and I'm going to think that they're going to be... Well, this religion, I'm in my head, I've got this picture of almost like a kind of like a Protestant religion, but with a Catholic longevity, right? So, recruit children. Okay. So I'm thinking they're fairly lawful. Most religions, most real religions are. I mean, they are a set of laws and governances and moral codes for their practitioners to follow, and they're expected to follow those laws, right? So by definition, most religions in the real world are lawful good, because they're very big on laws. I think that as a predominant religion in the big city, probably going to be the case here. Oh. Talking to poor parents who can't take care of their children. Oh, I like that. Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. City to city to talk to destitute parents and recruit and offer the children sanctuary and education. They do the same for orphans. Okay, so their primary public agenda is to recruit children, to raise them. All right, so this is kind of feeling like a kind of the Buddhist monastery type thing, where most of new initiates are typically children, and they're trained their entire lives in the priesthood. So it kind of has that kind of feel to it, I think. And I like that. That's cool. So perhaps like the Buddhist monks, they are yeah, I like that. And priests are typically well-trained fighters or warrior monks. Orphans and underage criminals. Okay. And some of this stuff that we're putting here may need to be moved to other areas, but I kind of go through this and kind of do a brain dump and then go back and edit things and make them purty. And so helping the authorities, which is one of the reasons the authorities like to have them in their cities, because they get a lot of crime off of their streets, so it's helpful to the politics in the area, and it's helpful to the leaders in the area because they can say, hey, look, we've got a crime-free city. So this helps them with their political agendas as well. So they are very ingratiated to the political higher-ups in the places they are. And I mean, that's not why they're doing it, but that's an effect of what they do, I think. So their goal is to... yeah, true. No starving kids on the streets. So they accomplish a lot of stuff. And, we'll get to assets in a minute, but if they're a very old, very established, highly regarded religion, they're going to have a lot of assets to do that kind of thing with. All right, so let's see, what did you say? Their goal. Yeah, the authorities aren't paying as much attention as maybe they should because the church does a lot of it for them, and thinking about quests, that's right. That's what I'm thinking about. How are my players going to be able to make use of this stuff? And by the way, gentlemen, one of the things that I'm about here is please feel free to follow me on World Anvil and take any of this stuff and use it however you want to use it. It's why I'm doing this, is so that everybody can have fun with it. All right, so their goal is to... Can't type. Take in the young and outcast and mold them in the ways of the church. All right. So I think that's good for that for now. All right, now assets. All right, here's where things get a little weird, because I'm not exactly sure. Hey, Patchwork, welcome. Have some artifacts to feed the hungry. That's cool. Infinite fount of hot soup. All right, well, I mean, I like it. So artifacts, let's start with the general. We can always come back and fill in the specific later. They would also have collect alms. I would imagine so. I can't think of a reason why, because typically religions, there are exceptions, but religions are very much based on volunteerism and donation. There were monasteries that made beer and pretzels and sold stuff and, to make money, but it was typically done on you can have this beer for some donation type thing. Typically that's how most churches work. Yeah, like they may sell their specialty light woven cloth to individuals for very, very tidy sums, considering there's a handful of people in the world that can actually make that stuff. I mean, if I was an organization that was trying to do good and needed assets to do it, I certainly would look for ways to bring in those assets. And if I had a specialty like that, that's marketable. So they sell their light weave cloth for much moolah. Let's see, what other kinds of cool things might they have? I mean, lots of cash. They're gonna have they would have like hostels in the major cities for the priests. They would have let's see, so if your priests are traveling all the time, you're going to have things to help them travel, right? So you're going to have all of the yeah, rare minerals or gems. So is this religion one of the healing type religions, or is it one of... So if you think about... All right, so let's think about the Catholic priests versus Buddhist monks, okay? The Catholic religion is very, very based on healing and I can't think of the word, escape my brain. Miracles, that kind of stuff, right? The Buddhist religion has a very different feel to it. It is more one of oneness with what's around you, and I'm not trying to say what Buddhists believe. I'm saying what the Buddhist warrior monk image is. It's a very different image from like a Christian priest, and it's more about enlightenment and oneness with your surroundings, and service to Christianity is very much about service to the community, but there's much more of a otherworldly feel to religions like Christianity, and much more of a worldly feel to religions like Buddhism, right? I'm not sure if I'm explaining that quite right, but so is this a religion? Right? And maybe they maybe in every major city they have a large communal garden for their own food and surplus for the pops. Something like that, right? Oh, prayer stones. Okay. Now, okay. I had pop into my head, like, have you ever seen like the meeting stones in World of Warcraft stuff? Those huge stones with like the lit up symbols and stuff. But were you talking prayer stones, like individual prayer stones that they would hand out that would help you concentrate your energies and stuff like that? Yeah, the big, okay. So monolithic, ornate. I mean, I would assume these would be very ornate things because, you know, like if you have the one monolithic prayer stone in the city, they're going to put a whole lot of effort into it, I'm thinking. Mass prayers and rituals. So something like that, huh? I'm liking this, chat. This is fun. I'm having fun, chat. On Beer Wednesday. Let's see. So that was... All right, so I need to give you my opinion of this one. This is Kona Brewing Company, Hanalei Island IPA. It's light beer. I'm more of a dark beer type of person, but that was pretty good. I mean, not a Bud Light like light beer. I mean, like a light colored beer. So now I've got this Kona Gold Cliff IPA. See how that is. That's better. I like that better. That Hanalei is a bit more bitter. All right, anyway, enough about beer. Back to religion. Okay, whatever. Anyway, all right, so that's a lot of assets. Now, how are they going to control those assets? For instance, does the church make and sell beer? I mean, it could. Catholic churches in the Middle Ages or monasteries and stuff would. They would make and sell ale. That was a big business. But what I'm okay, so small history lesson, if you don't know, the Crusader Knights, The God, the name just escaped me. Great history lesson, huh? Not the Teutonic Knights, the ones you hear about all the time during the Crusades, the Templars. Thank you. The Templars actually started one of the first centralized banks, so that, you know, over in Europe, you could say, here's some money. They would give you basically a receipt that says, okay, now when you go to Jerusalem, you can hand this receipt to our branch over there, and they'll give you that amount of money. So the Templars made massive amounts of money doing that kind of stuff, and they had huge places to store all these assets. So I'm thinking, if this is going to be a very old religion that has lots of stuff, then they'll need to have assets to store the assets, right? Weird. I just went asset inception there. Monoliths are easy because they're ultimately only useful to the faithful. It's like having a monument. You make it and maintain it, but nobody has any reason to take it unless you inlay gold. Yeah, good point, Patchwork. Yeah, I think they would be ornate, like ornately carved and stuff, but I don't think they would have gems and gold and stuff in it. Because honestly, for a religion that is actually trying to be good to the populace, doing that is wasteful. I mean, making it look pretty and nice and ornate, and showing off the craftsmanship of local people, you know, hiring local stonemasons to come carve this thing and stuff, that's useful. Putting a bunch of gems and gold in it, not so much. Anyway, that's my way of thinking. So it makes sense that they wouldn't be gaudy, but they would be ornate and beautiful. All right, so they would have, so let's say they would have like branch banks to store and control the assets. Like the Templars. Yeah. Ornately carved, but common materials. It's just a big rock. It's just got pretty carvings in it. All right, so I think that may be enough about their assets for now. That's a lot of assets. And again, when I start these things, I just kind of go through and brain dump, and then I come back and as I have time and work through, like I may come back into here and say, oh, this needs to be moved up here, and let's make this better wording and that kind of stuff. Depending on which parts it is, because I may not need to spend that much time on this, depending on how large of a part of my campaign it's actually going to be. This may just be background information so that it helps me come up with stories and reactions and interactions on the fly if I have this kind of world build information in the back of my head. That means it doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be functional. All right, so let's think about some history. Hey, Daka, how are you doing? Come to join us on Beer Wednesday, did you? So history. So this is a very old religion. You know, to contrast it with our very young religion that we had, that we made earlier. So it didn't have much history. But this one's going to have, I'm thinking thousands of years of history. So think Catholicism or Buddhism or, the very old religions. Hey, Sid. How are you doing? So I think that all right, so the children of Dugar I haven't actually created the thing yet. So let's say it's almost 3,000 years old, right? So now we have kind of at least a time frame. Now, when you think about religions, they always start in some small place with some event, right? And then they start spreading. So if they become a predominant religion over 3,000 years, they started small with something that happened. Right, exactly. So a lot of religions do start with creation myths or stories. I'm trying to be careful here. I'm a religious person. I don't want to offend anybody who is or isn't a religious person, and it's fine if you is or isn't a religious person. But I don't want to call them myths because maybe some of them are, maybe some of them aren't. Depends on what you believe, right? So I call them stories. I just like to be, I don't know, maybe I'm being a little oversensitive, but anyway, I call them religion stories. But yeah, the creation stories that religions come up with are often the very first things in religions. For instance, the origin of the word myth, like mythos. Yeah, I guess you're right. That's true. Has a different connotation today, but yes, that's true if I think about it. Anyway, if you read a lot of the religious texts, the first parts of those texts are often creation stories. It's true of the Bible. Very first thing in there, creation story. So, that's I think why a lot of religions begin in the first place is people trying to make sense of how did we get here. Men who visions knew. Wow. Gentleman in Patchwork, I like both those ideas. I may have to make a third religion here. All right, let's see if we can let's combine those two things because I like them both. So let's say there were 3 traveling I mean, they wouldn't be priests yet because the religion hadn't started, but let's say there were 3 brothers, right, who traveled from region to region to, all right, let me, yeah, it does. I like it too. All right, so, all right. So let's kind of lay the groundwork for their creation story. So 3 brothers traveled from city to city to help feed orphaned children. Ooh, okay, so here's maybe another part of the story. On their way between cities, because 3,000 years ago, cities aren't going to be huge. They're going to be probably more like villages and a lot of empty space and wilds between, right? So they would hunt the food between cities. So now, because of this origin of their religion, hunters are a big part of this, right? And hunting itself is maybe it's maybe a skill that's taught in one of those internal guild type things, right? Maybe this is, if you want to learn how to hunt, you go to this religion and they have like hunting academies because it's a major part of their thing, and they hunt to feed. And like their priests are expected to hunt things as they're traveling between cities. Yeah. So don't necessarily have to be a priest class. Maybe they recruit a lot of rangers to be their priests because it's an important part of their belief system. Okay, so the three brothers would travel to feed orphan children. So they would hunt the food between the cities. So that's how they got it. They didn't buy food. They didn't carry a lot of money and stuff. They weren't rich. They just were good at hunting, and they'd hunt between, feed the kids, the orphans, as they got there. All right, so what else? Let's see. So then a great war with some type of foul beasts. Ravages the civilized world and reduces it to basic survival. Okay, so we've had, all the malls have been demolished, right? You can't go out and buy your Cinnabons anymore. What are you going to do? So let's see. And that's, we wordsmith this later. All right, so then the brothers. That's right. No more Cinnabons for you, Daka. Right, all the Cinnabon trees are gone. Or is it a Cinnabon bush? I can never remember. Anyway, so the brothers lead. Well, Cinnamon is, yeah. but they don't have just Cinnabon trees. Okay, the brothers lead the people to safety because they know the world really well. They've been traveling it all their lives. What if there's a sister? I like a sister. How about 2 brothers and a sister? And then the brothers, okay. Cinnamon bun tree. Yep. And then, okay, so the brothers end up being martyred. The sister becomes the primary hero as she's about to lay her life down to save the people from the encroaching terror that the brothers were unable to stop. But a miracle happens, and that's the foundation of the religion. I like it. I like it a lot. Oh. Yeah, or her cloth. Dugar spontaneously makes her not 3 deities, but 3 there's one deity, but he intervenes in this scenario and then starts helping, and so they start worshiping him because this is how he makes himself known. And so he makes her her garb just, shine like 1,000 suns, and it demolishes the encroaching horror and saves the people. And that's why they do these this light weave cloth. So as the siblings lead the people to safety, they are attacked by that's not Army of Beasts. Boo. Army of Horrors. Let's make that a proper name, because, the Great Army of Horrors. Don't know what they are, but it's bad. So the brothers are martyred. I spell that right? Yeah. And the brothers and sisters should have names, but we'll get to that. Okay, she prepares to lay her life down in a final desperate attempt to save the people. Dugar intervenes, and sisters right. Yeah, so the Great Army of Horrors is somehow affected negatively by the light. All right, so that is... Now, again, this is a creation story, so this may not have actually happened. May have, but may not have. This could just be a story that was made to kind of backfill the reason we have the garments of light and stuff. But It could actually be real heroes, or it could be one of those things like a lot of historical stories where there's a grain of truth and a lot of embellishment. Anyhow, I kind of like this story. This is kind of a cool little story, and it kind of is tying all this stuff together, their rules and all that. They haven't been dissolved. We're not going to do a founding date because I haven't set up a timeline for this world yet. We'll have leaders to backfill in here, but they're not going to have a parent organization. Their base settlement is going to be Branath, but I don't have the related ethnicities is not really relevant. All right, so let's take a look at anything in here we need. Yeah, I haven't set up the yeah, I don't care about that. Don't care about that. We've already kind of, I mean, some of this stuff I'll need to tag in as later, but there's not really a government system. Power structure system may be relevant, although none of these are. Economic system. No, that's more for geopolitical stuff. All right, so I'm not going to worry about that. The deities is going to be Dugar. We have to make a thing about Dugar, but some of the mythologies or cosmology. Here's what I was looking for. Tenets of the faith. And you guys can see in the World Anvil system, they've got a lot of stuff in here that really helps, but the brain dump we were doing, some of that stuff really should be moved over into some of these places. Like all the priesthood things we talked about, but tenets of the faith. So kind of what are their beliefs? Let's just kind of make a bullet list of their beliefs. So they believe that children are the most precious asset. Oh, isn't that so sweet? Let's see what else. They think that hunting is the primary way to obtain food. Not primary, is the best way to obtain food. Why? Because they were hunters. What else? What else we got, chat? I would say that hunting probably brings you closer to their deity. So if we think, all right, so let's think about the deity for a minute. So Dugar, I would say, would be based on the story we're kind of creating. Dugar is a kind of a master hunter, right? He's a master hunter, and he loves children. That's why he intervened with these folks, because they were, without knowing it, emulating him. And so when they got into trouble, he had been watching, but he decided it was time to intervene, right? So hunting and children are the big things for them. Just like the real world, hey? Yeah. So, whoops. Come back. Yeah, so they would believe that they would, they would live without holdings, because that's the way the originals lived in the creation story. They didn't use money. They went and hunted their food. They were subsistence people, and they did a lot to help others, and so others would help them. I mean, that's, the whole pay it forward thing is kind of how things tend to work out. Now, the church itself has to have holdings and wealth and riches, because it has to be able to support these priests and to, so, and this is a common thing in not just religion, but organizations. A lot of times they'll have tenants, but they end up having to break the tenants on the organization level, because there has to be some governance structure there, and there has to be those things. I'm not saying all the time it's okay. I'm just saying that's what ends up happening a lot, and sometimes it's necessary. Their minds are pure and should be molded early. That's why they go and recruit them as children. Good. I'm liking this, chat. This is good, chat. It's good, chat. Let's see. So I think that's enough for tenets of the faith. It doesn't have to be extensive. Also, if you keep it kind of simple, when you're having to create things on the fly as a DM that have something to do with this religion, it's kind of easy to remember this is what they're about. They're about children and hunting, right? So I just need to come up with something that does that. Ethics we've already talked a little bit about. I'll have to move some of this stuff over. Granted divine powers. All right, so this is interesting. So what does Dugar give his priests? Do they have something special in our world that is granted from Dugar? I mean, I would think it would have to be. Good night. So it would be something with hunting, and or something that has something to do with children, right? So some hunting skills. So maybe priests of Dugar are blessed with beast scouting skills. What did I just do? Well, that was weird. All right, let's see. So, beast scouting skills. What does that translate to mechanically? So maybe a +2 to track beasts in the wild. Okay. They all have a ooh. All right. Let me get this down, and then we'll talk about some equipment that I think they could get. Oh, not a light power, but Oh yeah, good point, Fairy Bard. They're tracking the Great Army of Horrors, whatever those are. Sorry, I'm thinking too far ahead here. Light power. Okay, so not a light power as such, but they are given special vestments that can illuminate on command. This is the light weave cloth. I mean, every priest should have some light weave, right? That's their thing. All right, so they're blessed with and, you know, we'll have to figure out what this Great Army of Horror is. So that's so central, maybe they get a +4 to track those. Ooh, I like that, Sid. All right, so see, now that's a whole adventure right there, is children having all these nightmares, and the light weave is used to get rid of them, but you got to find out what's causing all of them. But oh yeah, I like that. Hunters, monster killers, protectors of children. Yeah. Good. Yeah, I like that. All right, cool. Oh, also, they should have some kind of, either they're given some special bow or special arrows, or some kind of divine bonus when shooting or something like that. They should have something like that, right? Maybe the priests are giving us... Oh, yeah, I like that better. Special oil. So it's a... Okay, so... Because I'm trying to think about what mechanically would this do in the game. So maybe it gives them a +1 to hit beasts if they put this oil on the arrows. It's an oil of true flight. How about that? How's that sound, chat? All right, so there's a couple of things I want to go back and do. Let me save what we've got here. I want to go back to this first tab real quick, and we got to talk about the guilds a little bit. They're also the only ones that know how to make this true flight oil, right? So they have the guildy stuff for that. We'll talk about, I mean, we could actually make articles for each of these guilds. We'd probably want to come up with a different name than guild, because A, that's confusing, and B, that's not really what it is. It's more, I don't know what you call it internally, but where was I? Religious. Okay, here we go. Cool, I like that. So the political intrigue and influence, I think we touched on a little bit. Doing a piety faction. What do you mean a piety faction? Not sure I'm familiar with that term. No, I'm not. I mean, maybe. But I'm thinking of it as developing more of an entire religion in this world. That then could be... Oh, yeah, like the Zents and the Harpers. Kind of, but not... Not really. It's a religion that has developed kind of these internal guilds because they are the keepers of these things that were given to them by Dugar, this knowledge of how to make these things. So it's kind of, I mean, I don't know. Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're probably talking about the same thing, I suppose. All right, so political intrigue and influence, we kind of touched on that a little bit, that they're liked a lot by the cities because they help the cities control crime, but that has the unfortunate side effect of making the city guards a bit lazy. So there could be some things going on in that. Worship, I think, is, how often do you... Is it solo worship? Is it group worship? How often do you do it? How often, where should it be? Does it need to be in a specific place? Are there specific rituals involved? And then, are there sects of this? Not SEX, although, that could be a whole religion in itself. But, for instance, in the early days of Christianity, there were many sects that popped up, like the Coptics and the Orthodox and many others. And in fact, Christianity itself was a sect of Judaism in the beginning. So there's all kinds of you can get very detailed and complicated with this stuff because religion is a very detailed and complex organism. The way that they not only form and expand, but the way that they interact with each other. And so if we were to, and I don't want to go too far into this because we're running short on time, but you've had a chance kind of to see what we can do with building a new religion in your world, one that's not terribly developed and one that you can kind of have fun with and let you and the players kind of grow that story. And then we've also kind of taken a look at what happens with a very established and old religion and the kinds of things that you'll want to think about for that, because an established and old religion is going to have a massive effect, generally speaking. I mean, you're the DM, do what you want, but generally speaking, it's going to have a massive effect on your culture and the way things are done. Religion affects just about every aspect of society. It affects language, like the word holiday was originally holy days, and they were all religious observances. It affects the laws of your geopolitical states, because most laws in the real world, most laws are derivatives of religious moral codes. That's where a lot of laws started. It affects the way people interact with each other. It affects the food that is eaten. It affects the way cities are laid out. It affects everything. So At least in the real world, it does. Now, how much of that you want to bring into your fantasy world, certainly up to you. I like World Anvil a lot for this because you can see it helps you to think about a lot of the different bits and pieces, and you can make it as complex as you want and still be able to get to it. So what you need to decide when you're doing this, first of all, is how big of a player is religion going to be in your campaign? Do you want it to just be kind of a back of the mind thing? Yeah, it's there, but we're not really going to deal with it. Or do you want it to be, hey, everybody is dealing with this because this is a major part of the culture. And so whether you're a follower of these religions or not, how are you going to deal with it? And if there's multiple religions, how are they going to deal with each other? Right? Because as we talked about earlier, wars are either fought for religion or resource. So opposing religions have a lot to do with wars that pop up, right? That's just the way it works and has historically worked. The deities may actually live among the mortals. I really liked one of the things I liked about the Dragonlance novels, if you've ever read those, was that the deities actually were there, but they were disguised. So it's kind of like Jasmine going into the city, into the market, disguised as a commoner. So I really like that type of thing too, where Fizban is this weird old dude, but he's actually a god. So those are certainly things you can do. And if you have the gods walking around among the people, either they're going to be very flaunty about it, in which case it might be a little hard to role play because there's no it reduces a lot of the conflict because the gods can just take care of it, right? But if you treat them like Fizban in the Dragonlance Chronicles, then you've got this concept of the god wants to kind of experience this condition, but doesn't want to interfere in it, right? But at some points he may think he needs to, or the players have earned some help from this god. But the players may not know that the gods walk among them. It may be that it's a secret, and that's something that they discover in part of the campaign. Anywho, there's a lot of stuff you can do with religion in your campaigns. It doesn't have to be heavy, but it can be. The little new religion that we wrote up here, it's going to be a nice opportunity for some humor in the campaign because it's a light religion. It's kind of a weird premise, and it's just silly and fun, right? The other religion we wrote is much more serious and has much more of an effect on the world around it. So there's lots of ways to have fun with this stuff, and there are lots of ways that you can bring religion into your campaign and use it as a real integral part of it. But if you're going to do religion in there, I would really highly suggest that you think through some of these things that we talked about to understand how these religions are going to affect your world and how you're going to have to deal with them as a DM when your player characters are asking questions. I mean, if they're going to ask questions of one of the priests, you probably ought to have some answers. So just think that through if you're going to be bringing this stuff in. But I hope you guys enjoyed that. I really did. That was a great chat, and I had a lot of fun making those things. these videos, I'm a little behind, but these videos will be going up on YouTube before too long so that you can review them if you need to. Please do follow me on World Anvil. If you it's a free account. I mean, you get your free account, follow me. You can get into this thing. I've made it public so you can use whatever you want to out of it and knock yourself out. If you have suggestions for any of the stuff as we go through in World Build, or anything like that, you can message me on any of the social media stuff and in World Anvil and all that. So, drop me a line. I love to hear from you guys. If you have any suggestions for topics for this show, I would love to hear those too. I have some, but I will run out eventually, and I really want to talk about what you guys want to talk about. So if you have that, let me know. You can reach me on all the social media stuff: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, and now World Anvil. If you enjoyed this and want to support the channel and what we're doing here, please give us a like, subscribe, mash all the buttons, ding all the bells. Until next time, build on.